It was supposed to be the most ordinary day in the life of 22-year-old Nia Johnson. She had grown up in the rough neighborhoods of Brooklyn, where surviving the streets was more important than surviving school. The dreams of a better life had always seemed just out of reach, until the day she was offered the chance to become a surrogate for a billionaire CEO. Nia had heard the offer from a friend who worked as a nurse at one of the most prestigious fertility clinics in New York. The clinic had a reputation for helping wealthy clients start their families, and when they were looking for a young, healthy woman to carry a child for a CEO, the opportunity seemed too good to pass up. The pay was more than enough to turn her life around, enough to pay off her family's debts, put her younger siblings through school, and maybe even help her mom retire from the long hours at the diner. But what Nia didn't know was that her life would take a dangerous and unexpected turn in the operating room that day. The clinic, with its sleek white walls and high-tech equipment, was nothing like the cramped apartments Nia was used to. The nurses were kind, the doctor was professional, and everything seemed routine, until it wasn't. It all started when Dr. Evan Duvall, a renowned fertility specialist, entered the sterile room with a sense of calm confidence. He was used to dealing with high-profile clients, CEOs, celebrities, and even royalty. His reputation as one of the best in the business made him untouchable. He had performed countless procedures like this before, but on this particular day, one small mistake would change everything. "All right, Nia," Dr. Duvall said with a reassuring smile, "everything's set for the procedure. Just relax, it will only take a few minutes." Nia nodded, trying to calm her nerves. The thought of carrying a child for someone else was overwhelming, but the money, the chance to change her family's future, made it all feel worth it. She had been screened, tested, and approved for the process. There was nothing to worry about, or so she thought. What neither Nia nor Dr. Duvall realized was that a mix-up had occurred in the clinic's system. The sperm sample they had used was not the one intended for the procedure. It was supposed to belong to the client, CEO Richard Maxwell, a powerful, ruthless man who had built his fortune from the ground up. Instead, the sample that was injected into Nia's uterus belonged to someone else. Someone who had the wealth and power to turn her life upside down in ways she couldn't even imagine. As the procedure went on, Nia felt nothing more than the sterile cold of the room and the steady rhythm of the machines around her. It wasn't until she was lying in recovery, half dazed from the sedatives, that she overheard a conversation between Dr. Duvall and his assistant that would leave her heart racing with fear. "How did this happen?" the assistant asked in a panicked whisper. "The sample, it's not Maxwell's. It's someone else's. Did you double-check?" The doctor's face turned pale as he muttered under his breath, trying to mask his own panic. I don't know. This is a huge mistake. We can't let this get out." Nia's mind raced. Someone else's sperm? Before she could ask what was going on, Dr. Duvall and the assistant quickly moved away, their hushed voices growing more urgent. The panic in their words was enough to send a chill down her spine. She knew something was terribly wrong, but she had no idea just how wrong it would turn out to be. Little did she know, the sperm that had been mistakenly injected into her would lead to a series of events that no one could have predicted. The CEO, Richard Maxwell, would soon discover that he was not the biological father of the child he thought he was going to have. And Nia, the unsuspecting surrogate, would find herself drawn into a web of lies, wealth, and power that would change her life forever. The days after the procedure blurred together for Nia. The swelling in her abdomen, the nausea, the hormone treatments, all of it had become a routine. She tried to convince herself that everything would be fine, that this would just be a chapter in her life she could close once the child was born and the money was hers. But something felt off. There was a nagging feeling at the back of her mind, a sense of unease she couldn't shake. It wasn't until a week later when she received a call that everything began to unravel. The clinic had reached out to her, asking her to come in for a follow-up. The voice on the other end was cold, businesslike. "Ms. Johnson, we need you to come in. There's been an issue with your surrogacy procedure. Dr. Duvall wants to speak with you in person." Nia's heart pounded as she hung up the phone. She had no idea what kind of issue they were talking about, but the tone in the clinic's voice sent chills down her spine. The following morning, she found herself back at the same clinic that had seemed so pristine and professional just days ago. She entered the sterile waiting room, the hum of fluorescent lights above her the only sound. When Dr. Duvall appeared, his face was pale, his usual calm demeanor replaced with visible tension. He motioned for Nia to follow him into his office, and she hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. "I know you're confused," Dr. Duvall began, his voice strained. And I want to apologize for the situation. There's been a mistake, a serious one. Nia felt her stomach tighten. What do you mean, a mistake? Dr. Duvall closed the door behind them, his eyes avoiding hers as he sat behind his desk. He took a deep breath before finally meeting her gaze. There was a mix-up in the sperm sample, he said, the words coming out quickly, as if he couldn't bear to slow down and fully face the gravity of what he was saying. The sample we used wasn't the one intended for you. Nia blinked, trying to process his words. So, whose sperm did you use? Dr. Duvall hesitated for a moment, and when he finally spoke, his words sent a shock through Nia's body. It belonged to Richard Maxwell, the CEO you're carrying the child for. But it was not intended for him. It was supposed to be a different donor's sample. The weight of his words landed hard on her chest, suffocating her. The man she was supposed to carry a child for was the one who had been mistakenly linked to her. But it was the next part that sent Nia into a tailspin. The sperm used to fertilize your egg didn't come from Richard Maxwell, Dr. Duvall continued, his voice barely above a whisper. It came from his biological brother, a man named Zain al-Fayed. The name hit Nia like a slap to the face. She recognized the last name immediately. Zain al-Fayed, an international businessman, known for his wealth and controversial dealings. He was the younger brother of Richard Maxwell, and from the moment the name registered in her mind, a sense of dread washed over her. You're telling me that the sperm used wasn't Richard Maxwell's but his brother's? Nia's voice shook with disbelief. How did this even happen? We don't have all the answers yet, Dr. Duvall replied, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. We're still investigating the exact cause of the mix-up. But what we do know is that you're now carrying Zain al-Fayed's child, not Richard's. Nia's mind raced. She had signed up for a surrogacy to help a billionaire CEO build a family, and now, her body was carrying the child of a man she didn't even know. A man whose name was tangled in business scandals and family secrets. It was the last thing she had expected, and the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her. How is this possible? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. How do I even begin to understand this? Dr. Duvall stood up and walked around his desk, standing in front of her. His gaze softened, but there was a serious edge to it. We will take care of everything. We'll handle the paperwork, the legal ramifications, and everything else. We'll make sure Richard is informed, and that the al-Fayed family is too. But the reality is this. You're now in a situation that's complicated. And this mistake, it's bigger than just you and me. This could affect both families in ways we can't predict. Nia felt her head spin. The clinic had made a mistake that could potentially destroy her life, and the lives of two powerful families. What did she do now? How could she fix something like this? She had already signed the legal papers, had already agreed to carry a child for one man, but now she was carrying the child of his brother, a man whose family was involved in every kind of scandal imaginable. And it wasn't just the mix-up that had Nia's heart racing with fear. It was the fact that the powerful al-Fayed family, especially Zain, was now involved. If they found out, the consequences could be far-reaching, and if they wanted to take the child away from her, she had no idea how she could stop them. I'm scared, Dr. Duvall, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what's going to happen next. He nodded, his face grim. I understand, but all I can say is this. We'll do everything we can to make this right. But you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. The al-Fayed family has money, power, and influence. They won't let something like this go easily. And neither will Richard Maxwell. But we have to be ready for whatever they throw at us. Nia stood up, the weight of his words sinking in like a stone. She had no idea what kind of storm she was about to walk into, but one thing was clear. Her life was no longer just hers to control. As she left Dr. Duvall's office, her head swirled with questions, with fear, and with an overwhelming sense of dread. What would happen now? Would Zain al-Fayed come after her? Would the Maxwell family demand the child, or would they destroy her in the process? And, most importantly, what did she do now? The following days were a blur of confusion, legal paperwork, and endless phone calls. Nia felt like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty, each moment feeling heavier than the last. The mistake at the clinic had already begun to ripple outward, and she could feel the pressure mounting as the al-Fayed family's involvement in her life became more inevitable. Dr. Duvall's team had arranged for a lawyer to meet with Nia, explaining the legal aspects of what had happened, but nothing could prepare her for what she was about to face. She hadn't yet met Zain al-Fayed, the man whose sperm had unknowingly been used in her surrogacy procedure. But as the days passed, her mind swirled with questions. What would he want? Would he demand custody of the child? Would he see her as nothing more than an obstacle to his family's legacy? The day came when Nia received a call from the clinic. It was Dr. Duval's assistant, and the words she spoke made Nia's blood run cold. "It's time for you to meet Mr. Zain Al-Fayed," she said, her voice neutral but urgent. "He's requested a meeting with you at his office. It's important that you attend." Nia's stomach twisted. Zain Al-Fayed. The name echoed in her head like a ticking time bomb. He was the last person she expected to meet, and yet, there was no escaping this reality. He was the biological father of the child she was carrying, and whether she liked it or not, she had to face him. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at one of the most exclusive buildings in Dubai. Zain Al-Fayed's company headquarters stood tall and imposing, a sleek glass tower that symbolized the power and wealth he held. Nia had never stepped foot in a place like this before. The lobby was filled with expensive marble, art pieces from famous artists, and a sense of cold, corporate perfection. She could feel the eyes of the staff on her as she walked in, and the pressure of being in this world she didn't belong to weighed on her shoulders. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Nia was led down a long hallway to a set of double doors. The assistant who had greeted her at the front desk gestured for her to wait. For a moment, she was alone in the opulent hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She could already feel the tension building. What was Zain going to say to her? What did he expect? The doors opened, and Nia was ushered into an expansive office that could only be described as the epitome of wealth. A massive desk made of polished wood stood in the center of the room, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Dubai skyline. The room smelled of expensive leather and fresh coffee. And then, there he was. Zain Al-Fayed was everything she had imagined and more. Tall, impeccably dressed, with sharp features and eyes that were as dark as the night sky. He was the kind of man who exuded power with every move he made, and even in that moment, sitting behind his desk, he radiated a cool, commanding presence. His gaze flicked up from the documents in front of him as she entered, and Nia couldn't help but feel the weight of it, as though he was evaluating her in that single moment. "Ms. Johnson," Zain said, his voice smooth and authoritative, yet not unkind. "Please, have a seat." Nia hesitated before sitting down, her hands resting awkwardly on her lap. She didn't know what to say, how to act. The man sitting before her wasn't just the biological father of the child she was carrying. He was a billionaire CEO, a man whose name was synonymous with power in the business world. And now, she was forced to confront him. "I understand this must be overwhelming," Zain began, his tone surprisingly calm. "But I want you to know that we will make sure everything is handled appropriately. I know this isn't the situation you wanted, and believe me, I never intended for this to happen." Nia didn't know how to respond. She had spent so many days trying to figure out where she stood in all of this. She hadn't asked for any of it. The surrogacy, the mistake, the way her life had spiraled out of control. It had all been forced upon her. "I didn't ask for this either," Nia finally said, her voice steady, though her hands betrayed her, shaking in her lap. "I'm just trying to figure out what's going to happen now." Zain studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Nia's surprise, he stood up and walked over to the window, his back to her. "I know that this has caused more problems than you ever expected," he said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of something deeper. "But there's a child involved now. And that changes everything." Nia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What did he mean by that? "Richard, my older brother, is the one who intended to have this child," Zain continued, his voice betraying the slightest edge of frustration. "But as you've already been told, a mistake was made, and now I'm the biological father." Nia swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. "So, what does that mean for me? For the baby?" Zain turned back to face her, his gaze piercing. "It means that I will take responsibility for this situation. I want to be a part of this child's life, whether you like it or not. I have the resources, the influence, and the power to make sure the child is raised properly. But I will not let you or anyone else keep me from that." Nia felt a rush of emotions, fear, anger, and confusion. She had never imagined her life would take such a drastic turn. How had she gone from wanting to help a family, to being caught in a billionaire's drama? "I'm not here to fight you, Ms. Johnson," Zain added, his tone softening just a bit. "But I need you to understand that I will do whatever it takes to make sure my child has a future. A future that will be far better than anything you or anyone else could offer." The room felt smaller with each passing second. Nia's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process everything he had just said. She hadn't asked for any of this, but now, she realized, there was no turning back. Zayn Al-Fayed wasn't just a billionaire CEO, he was a man who was about to change the course of her life in ways she couldn't even begin to fathom. The meeting with Zayn Al-Fayed lingered in Nia's mind long after she left his office. She had expected anger, perhaps even threats, but instead, Zayn had been calm, controlled, almost too calm. His words echoed in her head, over and over again. I will do whatever it takes to make sure my child has a future. I will take responsibility. It was the promise of power that unsettled her the most. It wasn't just about the money or the influence, Nia could feel it. It was the weight of someone who could bend the world to their will. A billionaire's game of chess, where she was just a pawn in his grand design. She had walked out of his office feeling like she had no control over her own life anymore. The walls of the luxurious Dubai building felt like they were closing in on her. She didn't know what was worse. The fact that she was carrying a child for a man she didn't know, or the looming presence of Zayn Al-Fayed, a man who wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, get in the way of his vision. Nia tried to push the thoughts away as she left the building, but they followed her like shadows. She had hoped, so desperately hoped, that her decision to be a surrogate would be a chance to change her life for the better. But now, her entire world had shifted. She was no longer just a young woman trying to make ends meet. She was entangled in a web of power, wealth, and legacy, and she didn't know how to break free. That evening, Nia returned to the small apartment she shared with her aunt and younger siblings. The familiar scent of home, the clutter of their lives scattered around the living room, grounded her. But even in the comfort of her old life, she could feel the stark contrast between where she was now and where she had once been. The glistening towers of Dubai, Zayn's cold promises, felt so far removed from the simple joys of her family. Her aunt, a kind woman who had always done her best to support Nia, was sitting on the couch when Nia entered. Her face lit up when she saw her. Amara, you're back. How did everything go today? Any updates from the clinic? Her aunt asked, her voice filled with hope. She had no idea what Nia had just been through. Nia hesitated for a moment before forcing a smile. It's complicated. The procedure went well, but there's been a mistake. The sperm used didn't belong to Richard Maxwell, the CEO I was carrying the child for. It was his brother, Zayn Al-Fayed. Her aunt looked at her, confusion crossing her face. Wait, what? You mean, the sperm that was used for the surrogacy wasn't even from the man you were supposed to help? Nia nodded, the weight of the revelation settling in her chest. Yeah, it's his brother's sperm, and now, Zayn wants to take responsibility for the child. He's demanding that he be part of its life, and he's not backing down. He said he would do whatever it takes. Her aunt stared at her, wide-eyed. But this isn't what you signed up for, right? You were helping someone else, not his brother. You're not obligated to him. I don't know what to do, Auntie, Nia whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose this life. And now Zayn Al-Fayed is involved. He's powerful, and he's going to do everything he can to control the situation. I don't know if I can fight him. Her aunt placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Nia, you've been through so much already. You don't have to do this alone. We're here for you, but you have to stand your ground. You're the one carrying that child, not him. And I know it's scary, but don't let him scare you into giving up your rights. Nia felt a surge of emotion. Her aunt's words were comforting, but they also reminded her of how little power she actually had in this situation. She wasn't a wealthy businesswoman like Zayn. She wasn't a woman with connections or the ability to control the narrative. She was just a young woman from Brooklyn, with a dream of giving her family a better life. And now, that dream felt like it was slipping away. The next few days were filled with legal meetings, phone calls with Dr. Duvall, and the beginning of a battle she hadn't expected. Zayn's lawyers had already started to make their presence known, sending Nia threatening letters and demanding that she cooperate with their plans. It was clear that they wanted full custody of the child, but Nia wasn't sure if they'd go as far as to take her to court. The thought of a courtroom battle, of exposing her life to the scrutiny of the public, terrified her. She didn't know if she had the strength to fight it. One evening, as Nia sat alone in her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Zayn. I know you're confused and scared, Nia, but I want you to understand that I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to do what's right. Let's talk. Her hands trembled as she read the message. Talk? What could he possibly say that would make this situation any better? She had already seen the ruthless side of him, the man who had no problem using his wealth and influence to get what he wanted. But still, part of her hesitated. Part of her wondered if there was a way to make this situation easier, to avoid the inevitable clash between them. Was it possible to find a middle ground, or was she doomed to be caught in the middle of a battle for a child that wasn't even hers? Nia didn't know the answer. But she knew one thing for sure: she had to find a way to take control of her life again. She had to stop letting others dictate her fate. She wasn't going to let Zane or anyone else push her around. Not anymore. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of uncertainty. Nia couldn't escape the growing tension in her chest. Every moment felt like it was leading her toward an inevitable confrontation with Zane Al-Fayed, a man whose wealth and power had already begun to cast a shadow over her life. The texts, the lawyers, the constant reminders that her fate was now tied to this billionaire. It all felt suffocating. But Nia was determined. She wasn't going to let this mistake ruin her. She had already fought so hard for her family, and she wouldn't let anyone, not even Zane, take that away from her. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Zane's last message still burned in her mind. "I'm not your enemy. Let's talk." Was he being sincere, or was this just another tactic to get what he wanted? Nia didn't trust him, but she knew she couldn't keep running from him either. If she was going to regain control over her life, she had to face him head on. With a deep breath, she typed a response. "Fine, we'll talk, but on my terms. I won't let you control me, Zane." She hesitated before hitting send. This was it. There was no going back now. The response came almost immediately. "I'll arrange a meeting. Tomorrow at my office, 10 a.m. Don't be late." The message was blunt, commanding, but Nia wasn't intimidated. She had to take control. She had to stand her ground. This wasn't just about the baby anymore. This was about her, her future, and what kind of life she wanted to build for herself. The next morning, Nia found herself standing outside the towering office building that housed Zane's company. The skyscraper loomed over her, a testament to his power. But today, she wasn't the frightened girl who had walked into the clinic months ago. She was a woman who was ready to fight for what was hers. She took a deep breath and entered the building. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile but seemed to know exactly who Nia was. She was escorted up to Zane's office, where she was left waiting in a sleek, minimalist lounge area. The room felt cold, the walls lined with expensive art and polished marble floors. The modern decor seemed to echo Zane's personality, cold, calculated, and full of power. Minutes passed, and Nia's nerves began to settle. She wasn't sure what this meeting would bring, but she knew she had to be strong. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for her family, her future. The door finally opened, and Zane entered, looking every bit the part of a powerful CEO. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, his dark hair slicked back, and his posture exuded confidence. But there was something in his eyes, something that softened when he saw her, that made Nia pause. "Ms. Johnson," he said with a nod, his voice smooth and controlled. "I'm glad you came. I know this has been difficult, but I think we can come to a solution." Nia stood up, her heart racing. "I'm not here to make deals, Zane. I'm here to get answers. Why did you even contact me? What do you want from me?" Zane studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if considering his next words carefully. "I don't want to make your life harder. I never meant for this situation to occur, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that I'm the biological father of the child you're carrying." Nia folded her arms across her chest, her gaze unwavering. "I didn't ask for this. You think you can just walk in and claim something that isn't yours? This is my body, my life. I'm not a pawn in your family drama." Zane's expression shifted, the hint of frustration evident in his eyes. "You think I don't understand what you're going through?" he asked, his tone softer now, but still firm. "I didn't want this either, but I am not going to walk away from my child. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that for your child either." The words stung more than Nia expected. She hadn't expected sympathy from him, but there it was, buried beneath the walls of his power. For the first time, she wondered if he wasn't entirely the villain in this story. Maybe, just maybe, there was a part of him that wanted to do the right thing, even if it meant stepping into a situation that was far more complicated than he could have ever anticipated. "I never asked for you to be in my life," Nia said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I didn't ask for any of this. But I can't just hand over a child to someone who sees it as nothing more than a business transaction." Zane's expression hardened, the softness in his eyes replaced by something more familiar, an assertive, almost cold resolve. "This is not a transaction, Nia. This is my family, my future, and whether you like it or not, the child you're carrying is part of that." Nia shook her head, a wave of frustration washing over her. She had heard enough of his cold, authoritative tone. This wasn't just about family legacy, it was about control. His control. "I don't care about your legacy, Zane," she said, her voice louder now, her resolve hardening. "I'm not giving you my child. I won't let you dictate what happens to me or to it." Zane stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that." For a brief moment, Nia felt the weight of his words. The power he wielded in his wealth, his family name, his reputation, it was all too much. But then, something clicked inside her. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her. She wasn't going to be another piece in his family's game. "You'll have to fight for it," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Because I'm not giving up without a fight." The room was thick with tension, and for the first time in this entire mess, Nia felt like she might actually stand a chance.